They tell you aging is peaceful, that if you raise your children right, they'll care for you, love you, honor your years of sacrifice. No one tells you what it feels like when the same child you once rocked to sleep starts treating you like a burden. When she looks at your hands and sees only inconvenience. When you hear her say your name like a problem to be solved. I gave everything to my daughter. And the moment she tried to erase me for a real estate listing, I realized love doesn't always mean loyalty. It took me 70 years to learn how to protect myself. If you're a mother, you need to hear this. Stay with me till the very end and let me know where you're watching from so I can see how far the truth really spreads. My name is Maggie Walker. I'm 69 years old, and I live alone in a modest little house on the east side of Austin, Texas. I've been a widow for over 8 years now, and for most of that time, I've kept busy with small routines, watering my garden, walking to the post office, making banana bread, even when no one's coming over. I used to be so many things. I taught art classes at the community center, helped run the PTA. When my daughter was little, hosted the best Thanksgiving dinners in the neighborhood. But more than anything, I was a wife and a mother. That was my identity, my world, and I never once resented it. When my husband James passed, everything slowed down. He'd been the kind of man who fixed leaky faucets and left notes in my apron pockets. Losing him was like losing the roof over my head. But I still had Ashley, our daughter, and I told myself that as long as she was doing well, then I could be okay too. Ashley grew up and moved out like kids do. She married Brandon and got a good job. They were busy, but she still called. She still brought me flowers sometimes. That meant something. It made the house feel a little less empty. Even though I lived alone, I didn't feel lonely. I had the warmth of old memories, family photo albums stacked on my shelf, and the kind of quiet that isn't sad, it's peaceful. I liked my tea in the morning. I liked folding laundry while humming the same song my mother used to hum. I believed that love once planted in a family kept growing even when people drifted apart. I never thought I'd have to question that. I never thought I'd wake up one day and wonder if the love I gave was still alive in her or if it had simply faded without a sound. But at this point in the story, I hadn't reached that part yet. I still believed that a mother's love was enough to hold everything together. Looking back now, I think I was just holding on too tightly to something that had already slipped through my hands. It didn't happen all at once. That's the part that still gets to me. If Ashley had just turned her back one day and disappeared, maybe I would have understood it faster. But the change came in quiet little pieces, small enough to make me question if I was just being sensitive. The first thing I noticed was the calls. They used to come every evening like clockwork. 5-10 minutes. Just enough to tell me how her day went, ask what I'd eaten, maybe share a funny story about her coworkers. Then it became every few days. Then once a week. Sometimes she'd text instead and say she was swamped, promising to call tomorrow, and that tomorrow would slide into silence. I told myself she was busy. Work had picked up. She and Brandon were trying to save for a new house. But even when she did call, something felt different. Her voice was clipped, distracted, like she had one foot out the door even while we talked. I'd be telling her about a new flower blooming in the yard, and she'd interrupt to check a notification or say Brandon just walked in and she had to go. When we saw each other in person, it wasn't better. She still visited for birthdays and holidays, but she stopped staying long. No overnight bags, no lingering at the table after dinner. And when she hugged me, it was quick, a pat on the back like you'd give to a coworker. I used to hold her for an extra second or two, but she'd pull away almost instantly now. Then came the comments. They were never cruel, not directly. But they carried something sharp underneath. One afternoon, I mentioned that I'd forgotten to take the chicken out of the freezer and ended up having toast for dinner. She laughed and said, maybe I should write things down more often now. Just little remarks like that. Casual, offhanded, but they left bruises. Brandon was worse. He never liked me much, and I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt. But lately, his tone had turned smug, almost condescending. He made jokes about my age when I struggled with the remote, called me retro, when I didn't get his sarcasm. I'd cooked dinner for them one weekend, and he said the potatoes were dry in that way people say things with a smile that doesn't reach their eyes. What stung the most wasn't his attitude. It was Ashley not saying anything. She never once defended me, never told him to knock it off. She just kept scrolling on her phone or refilled her wine glass and acted like she didn't hear. One afternoon, after I told her I'd slipped on the front step but was okay, she paused and said she and Brandon had been talking. She thought maybe it was time I considered a place with more support. Some place where I didn't have to worry about little accidents. She said it so gently, like she was doing me a favor. I smiled and nodded, but inside something curled up. The house I lived in was the one James and I built. Every room held a story. Every corner was a piece of him. And now my daughter, my only child, was suggesting I let go of all that for convenience. I didn't argue. I just nodded and changed the subject. That night, I sat on the porch alone and watched the wind move through the trees like it had done for years. The quiet felt different this time. Not peaceful, hollow. That was when I started to understand. I wasn't her home anymore. I was an obligation she was trying to gently manage. And the worst part was that I didn't even know when I'd stopped being something she needed and started being something in her way. It happened on a Tuesday. I had gone over to Ashley's house to drop off a scarf I'd knitted for her. She'd mentioned getting chilly at night, and though she'd brushed it off, I still made it in her favorite color. I let myself in with the key they'd given me years ago, thinking I'd leave it on the entryway table with a note. I heard voices coming from the back room. I didn't mean to listen, truly, I didn't. But I recognized Ashley's voice right away, and something in her tone made me stop. I stood there in the hallway, still holding the scarf, and I'll never forget the way her words came through the wall like glass cracking in slow motion. She said she didn't know how much longer she could deal with me, that I was becoming too much, that she was tired of worrying if I'd fall or leave the stove on or show up unannounced. Then Brandon's voice chimed in sharper, colder. He said they should move forward with the plan. Sell the house, get the money while the market was good. He mentioned Colorado Springs and how they'd found a perfect place there to start fresh. Ashley said she already looked into assisted living facilities. She listed names like she was picking from a restaurant menu. One of them had memory care just in case. Brandon laughed and said, I probably wouldn't even notice I'd moved if they handled it right. I stood frozen. Every word they spoke was like a knife dragging slowly across my chest. It wasn't just that they were planning this without me. It was how they talked about me. Like I was a suitcase to be packed up and shipped away. Like I was an inconvenience they needed to manage. Brandon said something about my house being worth at least $900,000, maybe more. That money could put them in a bigger place with a yard and a home office. Ashley joked that maybe I'd finally be useful for once. My knees buckled, but I didn't let myself fall. I backed away, scarf still clenched in my hands, and slipped out the door as quietly as I'd come in. I got into my car and sat there with the engine running, the scarf now damp with the sweat from my palms. I don't remember the drive home. I don't remember locking the door behind me. What I remember is sitting at the kitchen table staring at the place where James used to sit and hearing their voices play over and over again in my head. They were going to take everything from me. Not just my house. Not just my independence. But my dignity, my say in my own life, my place in theirs. and they were going to do it with smiles on their faces, pretending it was for my own good. Something in me cracked open that day. A quiet place that had always believed Ashley loved me, that no matter how distant she seemed, she would never hurt me. That place died in the span of 10 minutes and two careless voices on the other side of a wall. I sat there until the sun went down and the only light in the house came from the flickering TV I never turned on. The scarf lay in my lap, still folded, still warm. I never gave it to her. I never would. A few days passed before I worked up the courage to ask her. I didn't want to believe what I'd heard, even though it played in my head every night like a cruel lullaby. Part of me hoped there had been a mistake, that I'd misunderstood something. So I told myself I'd just ask gently, and she'd clear it all up. I invited her over for coffee, said I had banana bread in the oven, and wanted to hear about her week. She came distracted as usual, tapping on her phone while I poured her a cup. I sat across from her, hands folded to keep them from shaking, and smiled like everything was normal. Then I asked, just like that. I said I'd been feeling like maybe something was going on, and I wondered if there was anything she wanted to tell me. She looked up confused at first, then narrowed her eyes just slightly. She set her mug down and asked what I meant. I said I'd just been sensing a change, like maybe there were conversations happening that didn't include me. I tried to sound calm, not accusing. I didn't mention the phone call. I just gave her a chance to be honest. She exhaled hard and leaned back in her chair. Her face shifted into something I hadn't seen since she was a teenager, half irritation, half pity. She said I'd been overthinking again, that I'd always had a tendency to imagine the worst. That living alone was making me too suspicious, too emotional. I wanted to say something. I wanted to push back. But then Brandon, who had come to pick her up, walked in through the side door like he owned the place. He heard just enough to add his 2 cents. He chuckled and said, maybe I should get my memory checked. That maybe it was time to talk to someone about things. Ashley didn't stop him. She didn't even look surprised. She just stood there, arms crossed, like she was waiting for me to drop it and move on. Like I was wasting her time. I nodded slowly and said nothing more. I cleared the mugs, wrapped up the rest of the banana bread for her, and walked them to the door. Ashley gave me a kiss on the cheek that felt like a formality. Brandon didn't say goodbye. I closed the door behind them and stood in the hallway for a long time. I couldn't decide what hurt more, that they were planning to take everything from me, or that they now believed I was too far gone to notice. It wasn't just betrayal. It was dismissal. They'd stripped me of the right to even feel wronged. And somehow, that was the deepest cut of all. It was Christmas Eve and I had spent the whole day baking cookies that no one had asked for. I wore my old red sweater with a little pine tree stitched along the collar, the one James always said made me look like someone from a holiday card. I stood in front of the mirror before leaving and told myself this would be good. That maybe tonight things would feel like they used to, even just for an evening. Ashley had invited me, but it felt more like an obligation than a gesture. Still, I arrived with a warm casserole and wrapped gifts. I smiled when I walked in, even though no one looked up right away. Brandon gave me a nod from the couch, already holding a beer. Ashley was fussing in the kitchen, her voice tight with stress. The house smelled like cinnamon and candles, but it didn't feel warm. Janice was there, of course. Brandon's mother. She never liked me much. She always acted like I was the worn-out cardigan in the closet, kept around out of guilt, not affection. I tried to be polite. I complimented her earrings. She just blinked and asked if I'd remembered to turn the stove off this time before leaving the house. I laughed, hoping to brush it off, but something in her tone made the air go cold. No one else laughed. Ashley kept setting the table like she hadn't heard it. We sat down to dinner, and I tried to find the thread of conversation to feel included. I asked Brandon about his job. I asked Ashley about her dog. My voice felt small in that big dining room. Janice interrupted halfway through my sentence and told a story about someone's grandmother who wandered into the neighbor's yard last week looking for her dead husband. She looked right at me when she said it. Brandon chuckled. Ashley said nothing. Then Janice said it. She said getting older must be terrifying, not being able to trust your own mind. She asked if I still remembered how to use the microwave. She said maybe next year they should just spoon feed me. I looked at Ashley. I wanted her eyes. I wanted her voice. I wanted something that said stop. But she didn't even look up. She kept cutting her meat like she didn't hear any of it. I blinked hard. I swallowed the ache rising in my throat. I set my fork down quietly and wiped my hands on the napkin. I told them I wasn't feeling well and would head home early. Brandon shrugged. Janice smirked. Ashley just said, okay. No one walked me out. No one asked if I needed help to my car. The night air was sharp biting. I didn't have gloves, but I didn't care. My hands burned against the steering wheel as I drove home. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't cry yet. I just kept seeing Ashley's face blank and silent while I sat there being torn apart piece by piece. When I got home, the house felt colder than usual. I went straight to my room, took off the sweater, and sat on the edge of the bed. I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying Janice's voice in my head. The way she made me feel like I was already gone. The way Ashley let her. Around midnight, I opened my nightstand drawer and pulled out an old Christmas card from years ago. Ashley had drawn snowflakes on the envelope. Inside, she wrote that I was the best mom in the world, that no one made the holidays feel like home the way I did. I traced the ink with my finger and felt my throat tighten. I sat there for hours staring at that card. I didn't feel angry. I felt erased. And that kind of pain sits deeper than anger ever could. It settles in your bones and whispers that maybe you really are becoming invisible. Maybe you already are. The house didn't come from money. It came from evenings spent with sore backs and calloused hands. James and I built it slowly, paycheck by paycheck, over years, when there was always something more urgent to pay for. It wasn't grand, but it was ours in every sense of the word. I remember the first time we stood on the empty plot. Just dirt and possibility. James held my hand and asked me to imagine where the kitchen might go. I pointed toward the east, said I wanted the morning light to pour in while I made coffee. He smiled like he could already see it. Every choice was made with love. The pale green shutters because they reminded me of my grandmother's house. The wide front porch so James could sit out and read the paper. We argued over tile colors, over the position of the window seat in the living room, but always with laughter. That house grew alongside our life together. Every nail in the wall held a memory. Ashley took her first steps in that house. She spilled juice on the carpet, wrote her name in crayon behind the hallway door. I kept it there all these years. Even after she left, that little scrawl stayed like a fossil of a time when she still reached for my hand. It wasn't just a building. It was a container for my entire adulthood. Every birthday candle, every flu season, every Christmas morning in footed pajamas. It saw my tears when James died, held me upright when I didn't think I could keep going. That house kept me safe even when the world outside didn't. So when I heard Ashley talk about selling it like it was some forgotten antique, something to be flipped and cashed in, I felt something shatter inside. She didn't see the life poured into the walls. She saw a price tag, a stepping stone, a down payment for something shinier in a different zip code. She didn't even ask what the house meant to me. She assumed it was just too big, too much work, that I'd be relieved to let it go. But it wasn't a burden. It was the last part of James I still had. It was where I still whispered goodnight to him before turning out the lights. I heard her say the neighborhood wasn't up and coming anymore, that it made more sense for me to live somewhere practical. She said these things like they were facts. But what she really meant was that she didn't see me staying in her plans. She needed the house, not the history. Brandon called it an asset, said I was sitting on a gold mine. I wanted to ask him if he thought memories could be measured in dollars per square foot. If he ever considered how much of myself I'd buried beneath that roof. There's a corner in the backyard where James planted lilacs for me. I never let the landscapers touch it. I sit there sometimes knees in the dirt and talk to him like he's still somewhere nearby. That corner means more to me than any inheritance they think they're entitled to. When I walk through the rooms now, I see ghosts. I see a younger me painting baseboards at midnight. I see James nailing down floorboards with Ashley clapping beside him. I see birthdays and snow days and quiet Tuesday nights with soup on the stove. None of that shows up in a real estate listing. They looked at my life's work and saw profit. I looked at it and saw everything I had left. And that's when I realized something I hadn't dared to feel before. They didn't deserve it. Not the house. Not the love it carried. Not the trust I had wrapped in every corner of that home. If they saw it as a check, then I would be the one to cash it. But not for them. For me. Because if no one else would honor the life James and I built, then I had to. And that started with not letting it be taken from me under the illusion of care. There comes a point when the crying stops. When the silence in your own home no longer feels like a punishment but a choice. That was when I knew something had shifted in me. I wasn't waiting anymore. I wasn't hoping Ashley would come around or that Brandon would grow a conscience. I had finally run out of room to be disappointed. I called a lawyer the next morning. A calm, soft-spoken woman named Helen, who didn't ask too many questions when I said I needed to make sure my house couldn't be sold out from under me. She confirmed what I already knew deep down. The deed was mine. My name alone. That conversation lasted 23 minutes, and when it ended, I sat for a long time at the kitchen table, breathing like I hadn't in weeks. Next came the real estate agent. Not someone flashy or loud. I asked around at the local diner and was given the name of a man who still wore pressed shirts and called his clients ma'am. I told him I was thinking of selling. He asked if I was sure. I said yes. I didn't explain why, and he didn't ask. That kind of discretion was what I needed. I didn't rush anything. I started by going through the attic. I opened boxes I hadn't touched in years. Letters from James when we were still dating. Ashley's old report cards. Holiday ornaments wrapped in newspaper so brittle it crumbled in my hands. I didn't cry. I folded things neatly, packed them with care, and labeled each box. These weren't just belongings. They were the parts of me I wanted to bring along. Not everything had to be left behind. I changed the locks next. I told the locksmith I'd lost the keys, and he didn't ask any more than that. I watched him drill out the old cylinder and felt a strange calm settle over me, like I was sealing a door that had been left open too long. Then I had the cameras installed. Just two. One by the front door and one in the hallway. Not because I expected trouble, but because I wanted to see it coming if it did. I watched the technician's hands as he tested the system. Steady, methodical, like he'd done this for women like me before. The last thing I did was write the letter. I sat down at my desk and stared at the blank page for an hour. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I wanted every word to carry weight. I didn't yell on the page. I didn't accuse. I told Ashley the truth, that I knew what she had planned, that I heard the conversation, that I wouldn't let my life be managed like a file in a cabinet. I wrote that I was selling the house, that I would be gone by the end of the month, that she had 30 days to come collect whatever she wanted to keep, and after that, anything left would be given away. I didn't offer a meeting. I didn't leave a phone number. Just facts like a weather report. When I folded the letter, I felt something loosen in my chest. Not relief, not yet, but space. And in that space, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't known I was missing. Strength. Not the kind that makes noise, but the kind that endures without needing permission. That night, I didn't cook dinner. I heated up soup from a can, ate it in silence, and watched the sky turn from gold to blue behind the kitchen window. I didn't feel victorious. I felt steady. That was enough. In the quiet that followed, I started to realize that power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it looks like a woman packing boxes in her own house with her shoulders squared and her back straight. Sometimes it sounds like nothing at all. They came back on a Sunday afternoon, just like they always did. Ashley had told me they were going to spend the weekend looking at houses in Colorado Springs. I knew she'd be smiling when she walked up the front steps, thinking everything was under control. Thinking I was still tucked away at home baking, waiting, ready to be told what came next. But that day they found a lock that no longer turned. Brandon jiggled the handle, knocked twice, then harder. Ashley pulled out her phone, confused, tried calling me once, then again. No answer. That alone probably rattled her more than the lock. I'd always picked up. Then they saw it. The small black eye of the security camera above the porch light. It blinked once as it adjusted to the movement. Brandon pointed at it like it was some kind of threat. Ashley bent down and found the envelope taped neatly to the door. Inside, just one line. Printed, not handwritten. No warmth, no explanation. The house is sold. You have 30 days to collect your things. I wasn't there, but I could picture their faces. Shock first. Then disbelief. Then that slow bloom of anger that only grows in people who are used to being in control. I imagine Ashley read the letter twice before passing it to Brandon. I imagine his mouth twisting when he realized there wasn't going to be a conversation, a chance to fix it or spin it or guilt me back into place. They called again. I watched the missed calls pile up on my new phone, the one with a new number. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Everything I had to say was already behind them. I heard later from a neighbor that they argued in the driveway for a long time. Loud voices, lots of pacing. Ashley cried. Brandon kicked one of the flower pots James had placed by the steps. It shattered against the pavement. The neighbor said it looked like something out of a bad movie. But it wasn't a movie. It was real. And for the first time, I was the one holding the pen. I didn't feel proud. I didn't feel victorious. I felt finished. Not with my life, but with the version of it where I was always waiting for someone else to decide if I mattered. That chapter was over. They thought I was helpless, that I would be grateful for whatever scraps of affection they tossed my way, that I would sit quietly while they dismantled everything I'd built. But they were wrong. I wasn't helpless. I was tired. And sometimes tired people become the most dangerous kind. Not because they want revenge, but because they've stopped needing permission. As I sat in my small rental apartment in Santa Fe watching the sun spill across a different kitchen floor, I felt no urge to explain myself. I had done what I needed to do, not to punish them, but to protect the part of me they never really saw. The part that remembered who I was before they decided I was nothing more than a burden. The house was gone. The door was closed, and I didn't owe anyone the key. Santa Fe was quieter than I expected. Not silent in a lonely way, but soft. The kind of quiet that lets you hear your own breath again. My new house, sat on a little slope with lavender bushes out front and a porch that caught the early sun. It wasn't big, but it didn't need to be. For the first time in a long while, I had exactly as much space as I wanted. My neighbors were kind without being nosy. They brought homemade muffins, told me about the best spots to buy tomatoes, and invited me to their weekly card games without pushing. No one asked if I had children. No one looked surprised when I said I lived alone. It felt like the world here didn't expect me to be anything except exactly who I was. I started walking every morning. Just a few blocks at first past adobe houses and barking dogs and wind chimes that danced even without wind. The air was dry and clean, and it made me feel light. I brought a little sketchbook sometimes and sat at the park drawing trees, clouds a stranger's shoes. I wasn't any good at it, but it made me happy. That was enough. I read more now, too. Old books. New ones. Books I used to read aloud to Ashley when she was small. I lit a candle every evening and let myself sink into stories without checking the clock. No one needed me to be anywhere. No one was waiting for dinner. There was a local arts center just 10 minutes away, and I signed up for a watercolor class. My hands shook a little with the first brushstroke, but no one cared. We laughed a lot in that room. No one asked where I came from. They just asked what colors I liked. Most nights, I made simple meals. Soup, roasted vegetables, toast with honey. I ate at my own pace and sometimes left the dishes until morning. The peace didn't come all at once, but it did come, like slow water over dry ground. I stopped feeling like I had to prove I was useful. I stopped apologizing just for existing. I still missed some things. James most of all. The way he used to tap my hand twice when he passed behind me in the kitchen. But I talked to him sometimes out loud, and the sky never made me feel silly for it. Santa Fe didn't give me back what I lost. But it gave me something else. A chance to remember that I was a person before I was a mother. A woman who still had mornings left to wake up to. And for once, those mornings belonged only to me. I don't hate Ashley. I've turned those feelings over in my hands 100 times, and hate isn't one of them. What I feel now is quieter. Like a closed door in a hallway, I no longer walk down. She's called. I've seen her name flash across the screen, sometimes late at night, sometimes in the middle of a quiet afternoon. But I never pick up. There's nothing left to say that wouldn't reopen a wound I worked too hard to close. I don't owe her my pain, and I don't owe her access to the peace I fought for. Maybe one day she'll understand. Maybe she won't. That's no longer my responsibility to carry. I raised her the best I could. I gave her love without measure. And when that love was no longer enough to keep her from hurting me, I gave myself permission to walk away. I'm not bitter. I'm not waiting for an apology. I simply know what I will and won't allow in my life anymore. That knowledge took decades to build, and now that I have it, I'm not letting it go. I still think of her sometimes. I wonder if she drives past the old house and feels anything at all. But I don't follow that thought too far. I stop where the ache starts. Some people say family is everything. I used to believe that too. But now I believe in boundaries, in choosing peace over proximity, in knowing when to let go, even if it breaks your heart. Ashley will always be my daughter. That will never change. But I am no longer the mother who will bend until she breaks. I am the woman who finally stood up, and I will not go back. If you're a mother like me, please hear this with a full heart. I know what it feels like to give everything. To pour your love into every lunch packed, every fever soothed, every night spent waiting for headlights in the driveway. I know how natural it feels to put yourself last, thinking it's what good mothers do. But I'm asking you not to forget yourself in the process. Don't give away every piece of your heart and expect someone else to protect it for you. Keep a corner of it for yourself. That's not selfish. That's survival. Love them with all you have, but don't erase yourself doing it. I made the mistake of believing that unconditional love meant unconditional tolerance. I thought if I gave enough, forgave enough, stayed quiet enough, I would always have a place in my daughter's life. I never imagined I'd have to fight just to be treated like a person. If I could go back and talk to the woman I was 20 years ago, I'd tell her to set boundaries with the same care she used to set dinner plates. I'd tell her that being strong doesn't mean never saying no. That love without respect slowly becomes a weight too heavy to carry. You deserve to be loved, not used. To be seen, not managed. If the people closest to you start to treat your care as a chore, it's okay to pull back. You're not abandoning them. You're honoring yourself. Please don't wait as long as I did to remember your worth. Don't wait for the betrayal, for the silence, for the cold moments that make you question if you ever mattered. Start now. Look in the mirror and say, I count too. Then live like you believe it. My story didn't end with a family reunion. It ended with a quiet house, a soft bed, and peace. And peace, my friend, is not a consolation prize. It is freedom. You deserve that too.